Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 119. And today we are doing Sport Karate Christmas Wishes, which I am extremely excited about. I'm going to start the show with a couple of updates. First and foremost, saying that I expect this show to be a little bit quicker. And I know that when I normally say that, it winds up being like an hour and a half long show. But tonight, I really mean it, in part because this is just me talking, and I know that you don't want to hear an episode where I just talk the entire time, right? Other than giving some opinions and doing this countdown of 10 Christmas wishes going into 2023 for the sport karate community. But also, I just want to give a few updates. And Raymond Daniels is fighting tonight for Karate Combat. So if you watch this show, that means that you're a fan of sport karate. And if you're a fan of sport karate, then you should be cheering for Raymond Daniels tonight in Karate Combat. So I want to be sure that we wrap things up in time so that everybody can see him fight on the main card. He's fighting for a belt tonight in that promotion, which could set up a lot of exciting fights in the future between other sport karate legends. I think that most of you may know what I'm talking about with that, but I won't speculate too much. And throughout this episode of the podcast, at any time, since it is just me, feel free to get interactive, jump down in the comment section below, ask questions, especially as I'm going through this countdown of my 10 Christmas wish list items. Feel free to ask about them, ask me to elaborate, and I'm more than happy to share those thoughts. So the little bit of a life update that I wanted to include before we get into the countdown is that this is the season 3 finale of the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. The reason that we've been silent for a few weeks and haven't posted an episode is because I was getting through my last round of exams for the pre-clerkship period of medical school. So basically, medical school is divided into two-ish parts, in which the first part of medical school is your pre-clerkship, where it kind of feels like you're still in college. It's mostly classroom learning. You're doing a lot of physiology and learning the body systems and taking multiple choice tests about all of it. You do some of the biochemistry. You do a lot of pharmacology, a lot of microbiology. And that's what I've been doing for the past 18 months. But the time has come as 2022 comes to an end. In January, I will be pivoting to the clerkship portion of medical school, which is when I'm actually going to be in military hospitals all across the country learning how to become a physician. So that's a big schedule change for me. I needed to get through those last few exams so that everything would go smoothly moving on to the clerkship period, and I'm proud to say that they did. And so now, that's why we haven't had a podcast in a few weeks, but we are back here tonight. We're bringing the podcast back. We'll be on another break because tomorrow I'm getting on a plane to go and meet Gabrielle down in Miami, where we will be going on our 6-month delayed honeymoon cruise. So I'm excited about that. We'll get home right in time for Christmas. We'll celebrate the holiday, get through New Year's. We've also got Competitive Edge Winter Camp coming up, which of course I'll be teaching at along with the Presley brothers. So you guys want to make sure you don't miss out on that opportunity. You can absolutely still register over at myuventex.com for that rare opportunity. Like I said, going into this part of medical school, I don't know how many more times I'll be able to say, hey, I'm going to be teaching in this place, or I'm going to be teaching in this place with the Presley brothers with me. We're unsure how many more times that's going to happen. So take advantage of the opportunity now, just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and Lebanon, Tennessee, coming up here in just a few weeks. So registration is still open for that. It's a great way to sharpen skills going forward for 2023. And then, of course, season 4 of the Jackson Rudolph Podcast will happen while I'm going on my travels to all the different military hospitals, not all the different military hospitals, but a lot of the different military hospitals over the course of the next year. We're going to try to get even more guests on the show more consistently. There is going to be more renditions of the game night episode. I've already got several people that have kind of slid into my DMs and are interested in being a participant to join defending champion Mike Brumet and the People's Champ Angel Diaz doing another game night episode to share some sport karate history. And that's all I've got for housekeeping and some life updates. And without further ado, we are going to jump into the top 10 sport karate Christmas wishes going into the 2023 season. And I'll start by saying that this idea for an episode was inspired by an article that I wrote for Black Belt Magazine last year that got published online. That was the top 5 Christmas wishes, basically the same idea of an episode. But one thing that I noticed in that article that I wrote, and you can go find it if you just Google search like Jackson Rudolph Christmas Black Belt Magazine, it'll come up. But that's neither here nor there. What I noticed about that old article from a year ago is that most of the things that I was writing about in that article was kind of like a message to the powers that be in sport karate, like, hey, promoters, hey, circuit directors, things of that nature. You guys should get together and you should make rule changes and you should do this and you should bring back prize money and all of those types of things, right? However, with this episode of the podcast, I didn't want to so much try to single out the people that are the powers that be, but I wanted to talk about what can everybody do, whether you're a parent of a competitor, whether you are a competitor yourself, no matter where you are on the spectrum of people that's involved in the sport karate community, what can you do that will help our sport be better in 2023? And that's what this top 10 countdown is all about. So without further ado, and again, if you're just tuning in, make sure you're dropping some comments down below if you have any questions as we roll into number 10 on our countdown, which is simply to be positive. It is not in 10th place because it is the least important on this list. In fact, you could make a strong argument this is the most important thing. And it sounds cliche, but I say it because I feel like I have to. Because so often when I go on social media today, and there's a few different ways that I see this, but I see so much negativity about our sport. And I understand that the negativity about sport karate that happens within the sport karate community, that is what we can change. However, when something gets posted on Black Belt Magazine, or it gets posted on Point Fighter Live, or some of these pages, and then we see people from outside of the sport karate community hating on sport karate, saying that, oh, they're cheerleaders, why are they yelling so much, their kata's no good, right? Those are all people from the outside looking in, right? And ultimately, part of our goal in growing sport karate is trying to win those people over, but there are some of those individuals whose opinions you're never going to be able to change, and that's okay. The issue that I have here and the message that I'm trying to spread about being positive about sport karate is to those of us who are within the sport karate community. There's no reason for you to be saying something that is publicly negative about the sport, especially not about its athletes and the competitors that dedicate hours upon hours on a daily basis to train themselves to be at the top of sport karate. Because I've seen plenty of negative comments coming from within the sport karate community about competitors who are consistent overall grand champion winners, who make it on stage, who are NASCAR world champions, who travel and support all these tournaments and who love what they do. And yet our own community still finds a way to be negative about some of these competitors. And in my opinion, that's not helping anybody other than the person who's making the comment, because making that comment probably makes them feel better about themselves, right? And that I don't really care about. Doesn't matter if you feel better about yourself. What matters is what is best for the community and what is going to help sport karate continue to grow. I'm not going to single anybody out. I'm not going to call names, because then I'm just one of those same people spreading the negativity and saying, oh, well, let's all go cancel this person. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that as a whole, if you are in the sport karate community and you want to see sport karate grow, publicly, everything should be positive. Show your enthusiasm. Talk about everything that you love about the sport that we do, about the sport that we have dedicated much of our lives to. And if you do have something that is an improvement or a constructive criticism, then handle it privately with the people that can fix whatever that issue is. Because there are problems. There are things that need to be better. But we don't just need to go out and publicly slander whatever we don't like something in sport karate. And there's never a reason to slander a competitor who spends all of their time and all of their energy and all of their passion focused on this sport that, again, we all love so much within the sport karate community. So I'm off my soapbox about that. Basically, I'm telling all of you to behave, and that's what number 10 is on the countdown. So that is my first Christmas wish for sport karate, is that everybody can be positive and spread enthusiasm and positivity about sport karate. Next on my countdown, coming in at number 9, and I'm going to read this one directly from my notes to make sure that I deliver it exactly the way that I wrote it down and intended. Number 9 is, I wish that everyone would appreciate every style for what they do, because NASCA and most sport karate circuits, I said most, are open circuits, right? And I'm not even talking about the need for separate divisions for some of the things that we're going to get into. That's going to come a little bit later in the countdown. When I say appreciate, this is actually more tied into the discussion that I just had about social media and about not just bashing our sport because there's someone that you don't like or something that you don't like. But oftentimes when I see those comments coming from within the sport karate community, it's often a difference in opinion about what style somebody is doing, right? So the place that I've seen this the most is in this debate that's going on right now between contemporary traditional weapons, which is what has been mostly successful on NASCA for the last decade, which is high-speed forms that are made up of traditional movements for the most part, striking, stances, transitions. Sometimes people try to tightrope walk a little bit too much on creativity, and I see that point. I do think that sometimes competitors get too creative in the traditional weapons division. But most of the changes that are being made have to do with increased levels of intensity and increased pace or speed to the form. And inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. But I see traditionalists who think it should be done the traditional way with the slower paced forms. And I do think there's a place for those forms in the sport. Absolutely, I do. But I often see those traditionalists, and I'm not saying all of them, but there's a few of them, that are bashing the contemporary style when the athletes that are doing the contemporary style are just doing what they were taught and they're doing what it takes to win. Right? The classic example is a guy like Jake Presley, who has been absolutely dominant in traditional weapons this year. I'm fairly certain he was undefeated on the season in the division and in the grand championship for traditional weapons. That is an absolutely remarkable accomplishment. Jake Presley is 19 years old, maybe 20. He's 19 or 20 years old, right? So Jake Presley has never competed on NASCA when the most popular style of traditional weapons competition wasn't the contemporary style. Ever since he was an 8-year-old kid that was running around with his older brothers and myself at NASCA tournaments, traditional weapons has been the standard of a contemporary style traditional bow form. So it is what he has trained in for years. It is what he knows. It is a craft that he has come as close as you can get to perfecting. So why do we criticize that? Why are there people who criticize that, right? All he's doing is doing what it takes to win. And he's doing it very, very well because he was undefeated last season, right? We need to be giving competitors like that their flowers and not starting a debate about whether or not what he's doing is martial arts. It's clearly martial arts. If you stood in front of one of those strikes, it would hurt. He would be defending himself against you very effectively if you stood in front of one of those strikes. And of course, Jake is just one example amongst the list of many excellent contemporary traditionalists, right? And I will also say that we need to have more of a platform for what many would call the quote unquote, the true traditionalists. We need to have more of a platform for them to be able to make it on stage into the finals. For example, if the men's weapons division is going to be split into traditional and CMX, the traditional division should be ran in the nighttime show, just like the CMX division is. They are essentially equivalent overall grand championships, and the representatives of both divisions should be able to showcase their talents on stage. That means that when a true traditional competitor, as opposed to the contemporary traditional competitor, makes it into that round, they're not just ran off during the daytime. They get the opportunity to showcase their skills as well. And I'll call out a few because we have seen some very good kabuto or true traditional, whatever word you want to apply to it. We've seen some very, very good stylists emerge over the course of the past couple of years. Of course, Team Paul Mitchell's Sam Diaz is one of those people. We also have guys like Joey Castro who do a very good form of that style. You look up in the senior division and there's a number of competitors who do that style well. One that comes to mind right away is a Drew Derek Bisbee who does it very well. In the women's division, we saw in Toronto, Amber Rutherford winning with a traditional style weapons form like that. So the good thing is we're starting to see more of an appreciation for those true traditional style weapons forms. But what I'm saying here by saying that we should appreciate all styles, and I'm only using traditional weapons here as an example. You could say the same thing about Japanese style forms and Korean style forms. You could say the same thing about the approach that some people have to creative forms or extreme forms compared to other maybe more common approaches, right? There's a million different ways that you could break this down. It just so happens that traditional weapons is a really good example. But no matter what style it is that you prefer, what you do, we should appreciate those other styles. There's no reason that because I do one style that I should go and slander another style on social media because I want to be sure that everybody thinks that my style is the best so that I can have a competitive advantage, right? At the end of the day, there should not be any competitive advantage one way or the other for the competitor doing contemporary traditional weapons or the competitor doing true traditional weapons. And again, true is with the air quotes to signify that I'm not saying that that one is true and the contemporary is false. I'm just going by some of the terminology that I've seen floating about, right? So there should be no advantage for one or the other. Both competitors should be on an even playing field, and it should be about the quality of the performance. People ask me all the time, how are you supposed to judge traditional against CMX? And I said, well, in a perfect world, you would never judge traditional against CMX, but we live in an imperfect world, right? So how do we judge traditional versus CMX? You have to look at it on a spectrum for that particular division, right? Among all of the traditional weapons forms that I've ever seen in my life, how is that traditional weapons form compared to that entire spectrum? Of all the creative musical extreme weapons forms that I've seen in my life, how does that CMX weapons form rank along that spectrum, right? So if someone goes out there and does an average CMX weapons form by my standard, and then someone does an exceptional traditional weapons form by the standard of all the traditional weapons forms that I've ever seen, at that point, the difficulty conversation that typically gives the win to the CMX competitor, which, hey, I was most known as a CMX competitor, so I'm going out there and saying, we shouldn't just judge off of inherent difficulty, this idea of inherent difficulty, this idea that a CMX form is inherently more difficult than a traditional form. Number one, because that's not always true. And number two, even in a circumstance where it is true, if a form is more difficult, but it's just average, compared to a form that is less difficult, but is exceptional, the form that is exceptional should win. It is about how you execute what you do. And that ties back into the traditional weapons conversation in saying that you can compare contemporary traditional to true traditional by simply saying, of all of the true traditional weapons forms that I've ever seen, how does this rank? Of all of the contemporary traditional weapons forms that I've ever seen, how does this rank, right? And so I'll bring that all back by saying, remember, this podcast is aimed at what can everybody do? Not just what can judges do, not just what can competitors do, but what can everybody do? What everybody can do is everybody can appreciate the athletes for what they do best. Do not slander an athlete just because what they do isn't what you like, right? You should support greatness. There's a lot of greatness around us today, right? And the same thing goes for point fighting, by the way. I hear a lot of Americans tend to slander European fighters because the rules and the back fist to the body, the lead hand to the body, and they start to discredit some of the European fighters. And I'm saying that every American fighter discredits every European fighter. I'm just saying that I've heard some American fighters do that about some European fighters. And it's the same conversation. Their rule set in WACO in Europe is different. They're doing what it takes to win within the rules. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But at least appreciate the greatness that some of those competitors can display. Moving on to number 8. And as I mentioned, number 8 is going to be related. So number 9 was to appreciate all styles, regardless of if you like the style or not. Moving on, number 8. And this is where we get to more actionable feedback, right? Similar to point number 9, point number 8 is advocate for more equality between divisions. So the action here falls in the hands of the promoters, the circuit and league presidents, things of that nature, right? The action is dependent upon the powers that be. But in order for the powers that be to know what the athletes want, to know what the families of these athletes want, we have to advocate for it. We have to be outspoken about it. We have to communicate it through forums like this podcast, through discussion pages like Martial Arts Center Network and Point Fighter Live and sportmartialarts.com. And of course, any sport karate discussions that service here on Black Belt Magazine. You have to join the conversation and positively advocate for these types of changes. And I'm going to list a few that I thought of just as I was brainstorming this episode. One of them that I thought of was, of course, the traditional weapons, right? One thing that we can advocate for, I think that there should be a separate division for contemporary traditional weapons and for the more traditional, what everybody sees as traditional weapons, right? And all you have to do is call one of them open traditional. And hey, if we have a traditional challenge for forms, can't we have a traditional weapons challenge? And that be the terminology that's used for the more strict rules for the traditional division. I wouldn't personally be opposed to that, right? And so if you have a separate division, first and foremost, that split to me makes a lot more sense than separating the bladed from the non-bladed. Because if you group bladed together, well, traditional kama forms don't necessarily look anything like traditional sword forms. So it's kind of weird to separate those from traditional bow forms and traditional chucks forms, which, by the way, you hardly ever see a traditional chucks form. So let's use another example, maybe tonfa, which is also non-bladed, right? But the vast majority of those forms are always going to be bow. So essentially what we're doing, because the traditional bladed division is probably 80% sword and 20% kama. And then the bow, I said the bow division, the non-bladed division is probably 99% bow and 1% anything else. Or if we, that's including iku and bow, right? The or, right? I'd say probably 95% bow and then like 5% or iku, right? But that's neither here nor there, right? Instead of separating them that way, and let's use actual examples, right? I'll use 3 Team Paul Mitchell members that were in the adult division this past season, just as the perfect example. We already talked about Jake Presley. I already mentioned Sam Diaz. Now let's bring Dawson Holt into the mix. Jake Presley, contemporary style traditional bow form. Dawson Holt, contemporary style traditional sword form. And Sam Diaz, the true traditional style of kama form with what he typically runs as Gankaku no Kama, right? So if we look at those 3 competitors, right now in the divisional setting, Sam competes against Dawson, the true traditional kama against the contemporary traditional sword, and Jake competes in a separate division against other competitors, right? Does it make more sense to compare Dawson and Sam first, the true traditional and the contemporary traditional? Or does it make more sense if it was a separate contemporary and true traditional division or traditional challenge division, whatever terminology you want to use, and have Jake and Dawson's contemporary forms against each other first, and then Sam against maybe the Eku of Joey Castro in a true traditional weapons division? To me, that makes more sense. And it makes sure that you're going to get representation in the finals of both the true traditional style and the contemporary traditional style. So we should advocate for rule changes like that are more equitable for all competitors regardless of style. Now, obviously, style is not the only source of inequity within the sport karate world, right? Another thing that we can advocate for is in the women's divisions. And again, I've said this on the podcast before, and I will say it a million times over again. We don't necessarily need to also split the women's divisions. But whatever it is that we do with the men's divisions, we should be doing the exact same thing in the women's divisions. It makes no sense for there to be a difference between the two, right? And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the issue that I'm speaking on, I'll put it this way. In men's weapons, I'll continue using weapons because it's a readily available example for this weapons guide. In men's weapons, there is a traditional weapons overall grand championship, and there is a CMX weapons overall grand championship that pays the maximum prize money for winning that overall grand championship. Prize money is a separate issue. It ultimately needs to come back up as well. That's not something I'm going to discuss at length in this podcast. Now, on the women's side, they have one overall grand championship where the CMX weapons and the traditional weapons are combined. And that one overall grand championship receives the same amount of prize money as one of the 2 men's overall grand championships. And so not only is the prize money total for men in forms and weapons doubled compared to the women because of the fact that they have more divisions that are considered overall grand championships, now you have traditional competitors in the women's division always having to compete against CMX competitors, whereas in the men's division, that same issue is simply not present, right? So I don't want this discussion that I'm bringing out here to be muddied by a conversation about prize money, because that is an issue, but it is a separate issue that has a separate amount of criteria that needs to be discussed within it. But if you look at it, excluding the money conversation entirely, it doesn't make sense that a traditionalist in the women's division has to ultimately compete against CMX competitors to win the overall grand championship, whereas in the men's division, that is not the case. And like I said at the beginning of this topic, I don't necessarily mean that you have to also split the women. You could just put the men back together. I don't necessarily think that's the right decision. But again, my agenda here is not to say that I think it should be split or I think it should be together. My agenda here is to say that I think that the men's division and the women's division should be broken down in the exact same way, because that just makes sense. Right? And then the other example that I wanted to bring out on change that we can advocate for is the fact that right now there are certain styles of competitors that have more opportunities to compete than other styles of competitors, right? The common debate that people bring up in speaking about traditional forms is that Japanese forms always tend to score higher than Korean forms. That is not even the debate that I'm discussing, although that is a prevalent issue. I think that we've had a ridiculous amount of talent in the Japanese divisions, and that explains why for the past decade, really, we've seen so many Japanese competitors wind up winning the overalls, because there is so much talent in that division over the last decade. We've got guys like Ariel Torres and Joey Castro and Mason Stowell, and that's only talking about the men's side of things, right? There's a bunch of Japanese talent on the women's side of that division as well. So I'm not talking about judging. I'm not talking about the fact that Japanese tends to score higher than Korean. What I'm talking about is that when a Japanese style competitor comes to a NASCA tournament, they can compete in the Japanese Okinawan division, and they can compete in the traditional challenge division. This is also true in the juniors. In the juniors, the Japanese competitors can come compete in traditional forms, the same division as the Korean competitors, and insert every other style below. However, they also have the traditional challenge, which if I am a Taekwondo black belt that has only ever trained in Taekwondo and never done any karate, I simply cannot compete in the traditional challenge division. And so in my opinion, and again, you can either add an extra Korean division or you can take away traditional challenge. My agenda is not to say that one or the other is right. My agenda is to say that it should be equal. If I am a Taekwondo black belt and I come to a tournament, I should have 2 opportunities to compete with my traditional form if a karate black belt, say a Goju-Ryu black belt, has 2 opportunities to compete at the tournament. Regardless of your style, you should have the same number of opportunities to compete, because that Goju-Ryu black belt, they could go and they could run Super Impae in both divisions. But the Taekwondo black belt, they could not go and run Gaebek in both divisions. They could only run Gaebek in one division. There's only one division where they are eligible to do that for. And I have some structures that I think could solve that problem that I've talked about in the podcast before. But number 8 on my countdown is simply advocacy. We have to advocate for these things, for these changes to actually be realized, right? Now, I'm going to pause for a moment because I need to take a drink here, but I'm also going to remind everybody that's tuning in, if you have questions about anything that I'm discussing, because honestly, this is a one-man show for the podcast tonight because it's a season finale and because I had some information to get out, but really, with these type of topics, this is something that's meant to be a discussion. This does not need to be Jackson just speaking to the world and telling everybody what Jackson thinks. I would love to hear other people's thoughts in the comments. Any questions that you may have, if you want me to elaborate more, I'd be more than happy to share those things. So I'm going to rehydrate the throat real quick, and then we'll move on to number 7 on the countdown. All right, moving on to number 7. And this one, the middle of the pack is going to roll a little bit quicker than those first 3, because I'll admit for the first 3, I had to get up on my soapbox a little bit and preach to you guys a little bit. But coming on to number 7, another Christmas wish that I have for you guys is that in 2023, you will go to a tournament that you've never been to before. And this is something that veterans of the sport like myself, we forget really easily because these tournaments happen every year. It's rare that a tournament disappears. It's relatively rare that a new NASCAR World Tour event comes along. And so we kind of get accustomed to just like, oh, well, yeah, I've been to that tournament 10 times. I've been to that tournament 15 times. I've been to that tournament 20 times, right? Whatever the case may be. That becomes pretty normal, and we get a little disillusioned by it. But if we think about it, the Quebec Open, for example, hasn't happened since 2019. It's been 3 years since the Quebec Open happened, and it's slated to come back this year. There are kids in sport karate right now who are teenagers who are started competing consistently in sport karate right before the pandemic that have never been to the Quebec Open, that have never had the opportunity to go to the Quebec Open. So my wish for everybody in the sport karate community for 2023 is go to a tournament that you've never been to before, because it just might wind up being your favorite tournament. David Boissonnet and San Gagnon and Claire Cocozo, they run an excellent event up there in Canada. So now that the tournament's back, go check it out. If there's a tournament that over the past couple of years, there was a work meeting dad had to go to, or there was a summer camp that the kid was going to, and so it just didn't work out, make the exception this year. Say, hey, we didn't go to that tournament the last couple of years. Let's do it this time, and let's just see how it is. You just might discover your new favorite tournament, right? So I encourage everybody at some point in 2023, even if it's not a NASCAR tournament, it could be ProMac, it could be USA Sport Karate, it could be a WKC event. Maybe you try one of those annual championships, whether it be WKC or WKU or you do WACA or whatever the case may be, right? Go to a tournament that you've never been to before, because that is another opportunity to find a reason to love sport karate. That's another way to keep supporting sport karate and help the sport continue to grow. That's number 7. That one's pretty short and sweet. Number 6 on my countdown. And this one, I said that a lot of the things on this countdown are going to be for everybody to apply. But with number 6, I'm going to specifically talk to competitors here, okay? So if you are a competitor watching, make sure your ears are open. And if you are a family member that's got a competitor somewhere in the house, take this live stream to them and make sure they are watching and listening right now, because I'm going to start giving out some competitor advice. So my Christmas wish for you for number 6 is that competitors will be strategic competitors. And what I mean by that, I'm going to read my notes here once again. Throw the big move when you need it. Don't throw it when you don't. And this is a very simple concept in my mind that I see competitors make mistakes that cost them major championships every single year. If you need the big move, throw it. If you don't need the big move, don't. Take it from a guy who's been there before. There's nothing worse than when you come off the stage from a division and you didn't throw everything you had and you knew you probably needed to, and it didn't go your way. If it doesn't go your way, at least be able to hold your head high and say, I did everything I possibly could, and the judges just didn't like it as much today. And that's okay, because I'm going to be better next time, right? So my advice here is, when I say be a strategic competitor, don't just have your script. Don't just have, well, this is my form and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this form in the division, I'm going to do this form in runoff, so I'm going to do this form on stage. Because guess what? As you move through a tournament, things are going to change. Your top competitor, the number one guy or girl that's been gunning for you or that you have been gunning for, they could drop. If you have some crazy new move that's going to make everybody go wild and your top competitor has dropped, don't throw it. Save it. Go hit your form, take your win, move on to the next division, and save that move for when you really need it. Because when you really need it, you want to make sure you have something. Because you also don't want to be in that position where you're all hyped up because they shuffled the thing on Juventex or on Mad Action, and you're going last, and you're like, man, this is the perfect position. I just need to go hit my form. I'm going last. This is exactly the shoes that I wanted to be walking in this weekend, right? But your top competitor is going second to last, and your top competitor has a trick up their sleeve, and they bring it out in this division. You don't want to be the competitor that turns around to bow into the ring thinking, I don't have anything for that. I just got to do my thing and hope that it works, right? Be a strategic competitor. If you need the big move, throw it. If you don't need it, don't throw it. And at the end of the day, remember that if you're having trouble deciding which one, if you're on stage, if this is the finals, above all else, it's a show. So if you're uncertain, go out there and put on a show. And I think all of you know what that means, right? But above all else, be a strategic competitor. Don't let a Warrior Cup in a month. Don't let a Warrior Cup slip through your fingers because you just wanted to show off the big move, even if you didn't really need it in that Warrior Cup round. I did that in 2012. 2012, I was convinced that I needed to do my 2.5 spin catch. I was against my teammate, Michaela Johnson, fantastic competitor, right? Michaela stumbled in her form, right? She didn't drop. She still caught the form. It was great. She is deserving of having a Warrior Cup, right? Michaela Johnson absolutely deserves a Warrior Cup. However, if I had not been so stubborn and dead set on doing 2 spins and catching the bow behind my back, which had never been done in competition before, and my mom even told me, Jackson, don't you go up there and do that move. And stubborn 14-year-old Jackson was like, I'm going to do it anyway because I want to make history and I want to be the first person to ever do it and I want to win a Warrior Cup while I'm doing it, right? If I had just listened to my mom and not done it, I might have an extra Warrior Cup, right? Now, Michaela still could have beat me, right? But I don't know that because I dropped because I went for a crazy move that I may or may not have actually needed that nobody had ever done before, right? So be a strategic competitor. Do the big move when you need it. Don't do the big move when you don't need it. Moving on. Number 5, be a fan of sport karate. And I know this one sounds cliche, and it sounds cliche because it's a really easy one to do. However, we often don't think about it enough. And what I mean by that is that, and I get it, you go to a tournament and you're hyper-focused on your divisions because you want to do well. Your parents spent a lot of money to get you there, or your team spent a lot of money to get you there, or you spent a lot of money to get yourself there, right? And you want the prestigious title. You want to, move up in the points race for the world championship. You want to go win the US Open. You want to go win a Warrior Cup. You want to go win the Battle of Atlanta, whatever it might be, right? And so it's very easy to be at a tournament and get fixated on just your divisions and your business. And to some extent, you should be that way. I'm not saying you shouldn't be locked in. That's not what I'm saying. However, one of the things that I look back on and I appreciate most about my career is on a Friday night, for example, when I was done competing and the business was done, I got my wins, whatever. I took the time to stick around and watch team fights. One of the most exciting things that happens at a karate tournament, period, is team fighting on a Friday night, especially for me as a young fan of Team Paul Mitchell and then a teammate on Paul Mitchell, getting to watch some of those team fights. When I was a kid, it was watching Damon Gilbert and watching Alex Lane, watching Greg Betlock, right? And then as I got older and they were my teammates, it was watching Zolt Marati and Laszlo Gambos and Justin Ortiz and Cam Dawson, right? And I loved watching those guys go to battle and try to win the team fights. There was so much energy. And again, that was as a fan or as a teammate. It didn't matter. But I appreciate now so much that I took advantage of the opportunity to, instead of not taking that extra 30 minutes to watch the team fights and go focus on getting some food and going to bed and getting my sleep so that I can compete the next day, I took that 30 minutes to be a fan. I went and I enjoyed being able to watch the best in the world do what they do, right? As a forms and weapons competitor, for me, that goes 2 ways, right? Sometimes that could just be me on deck, sitting back and watching a competitor. Being like, man, Reed Presley's really good. Cole Presley's really good. Tyler Weaver is really good. Austin Crane is really good. Whoever that competitor was, right? And just appreciating my fellow competitors and being like, not only do I get to share the ring with these guys, but I get to watch them, right? And I would hope that they think the same thing about me when I'm up there, right? So being a fan of your competitors, right? Obviously, you want to beat them. Obviously, you want to win, but appreciating the opportunity to share the ring with them. That's why I've never understood doing the, I guess it's the single A NASCA division, right? The non-NASCA division. If I was going into a tournament, it was my first US Open ever, and I didn't know what I was doing, I would at least want the experience of competing against the best in the world. If you're new to sport karate and you see that you have the option to register for the non-NASCA division, don't do it. Register for the NASCA division. Go compete against the best in the world. go embrace the opportunity to share the ring with them. So that's one way that I mean be a fan as a forms and weapons competitor. The other way that I mean be a fan is look at point fighting, right? One of the things that I appreciate most about taking those extra 30 minutes to go watch team fights is that I got to spend time up close within feet or sometimes inches of the best in the world and sometimes some of the best to ever do it. I watched Raymond Daniels fight dozens and dozens of times live, right there, inches from the ring, right? And it's because I didn't just finish my divisions and go to my room and sleep. I finished my divisions and then I appreciated the greatness that was around me. I got to watch a run where Justin Ortiz was the best lightweight in the world for a couple years. And man, that was fun watching him fight. I got to watch Zolt Murati and Laszlo Gambos come over from Hungary and win some of the most prestigious titles in the United States. I've gotten to watch Jack Felton fight. I've gotten to watch Ross Levine fight. I've gotten to watch all-time great fighters do their thing. And that's awesome. So if you're a forms and weapons competitor, take advantage of the opportunity to be a fan. Don't just be there for your divisions. But if you see Bailey Murphy fighting in the other ring, if Elijah Everill's here and you see Elijah Everill fighting in the other ring, go watch them. We are watching generational talent in point fighting right now, right? And especially some of these young guys for Paul Mitchell, right? Sebastian Villanueva, Alex Mancias, right? Go watch those guys too. Alex Mancias just took his first win in the adult division at Pan Am's for point fighting. He's up and coming. You know if you watch this podcast enough that I got to shout out my Paul Mitchell point fighters as well, right? But it's important to be a fan of those around you, right? I see a comment coming in from Mike Brume. Let's see what Mike says. And I'm going to go ahead and show this comment on here. Mike Brume tuning in. Appreciate the comment, Mike. He says, men's musical weapons at 2021 U.S. Open is burned in my brain purely because of having to follow you up. Oh, I didn't even know this was a comment about me when I opened it up. Thank you, Mike. It's one of my favorite memories. But yeah, I mean, those are the things that you should appreciate about a tournament. And it's not about the fact that it was me, right? But for example, like one of the things that I regret most about my career that I have no control over is the fact that I never got to share the ring in a solo division with Kalman Choga or Matt Emick. Those were the two guys in the weapons division that I watched growing up that I wanted to be able to compete against one day, and they both retired before I turned 18, right? But like, if I had gotten the opportunity to share the ring with them, I would have cherished it. I would have done everything I can to whoop them, but I would have cherished that opportunity to be in that ring and watch those guys up close and personal and get a chance to go toe-to-toe with them, right? Be a fan of the sport at any tournament you go to in 2023. That is my, I think it's fifth on the list, Christmas wish for you next year, okay? Now, we're into the top five now. Now we're moving on to number 4. And number 4 is, and this is another good tip just for competitors in general, and again, I'm going to read my notes to be sure that I say it exactly the way I thought of it. Remain active on social media. It's how teams notice you and you earn opportunities, and it helps all of us grow the sport as a whole. I learned this firsthand doing the Paul Mitchell social media and running their Instagram, right? The things that you can spread about sport karate just by making a social media post are incredible. We posted a video about Dawson Holt at the U.S. Capitol Classics, went viral, got over 3 million views, probably upwards of 4 million views now. And think about how many people just randomly scrolling social media now know about sport karate because they got to watch that video of Dawson that otherwise wouldn't have any idea what it is that we do. They'd have no idea that this is even a sport, right? So my advice to you for all competitors is post on social media for the holistic reason that it's going to help the entire sport grow. If every single athlete that competes in sport karate makes one post a week, we are going to grow exponentially in terms of our viewership, because over time there will be millions of people who see those videos, and every single person has a unique following on social media, and you never know when the right person is going to see it. What if the video that you post is the video that the CEO of Monster Energy, for example, maybe they see that video. Maybe they're like, man, you know what? This is pretty cool. We like sponsoring extreme sports. Why don't we look into sponsoring sport karate? Let's see what we can do about this. Who can we reach out to about this? Maybe we'll sponsor that athlete. Maybe we'll sponsor one of these big tournaments, right? You never know who's watching on social media. So post, and you never know who's going to see it. And so there's like the whole like grow sport karate aspect of this, but there's also the aspect of it helps your journey as a competitor, right? For example, as the player development coach for Team Paul Mitchell, who has a role in recruiting, and as a head coach of Team Competitive Edge, right? I look at athletes' social media all the time, right? Because if I see someone that is always posting crazy stuff on social media, showing how skilled they are, obviously that's going to be a good thing, right? But also, are you a positive role model? Are you posting things that uplift other athletes? Are you posting things that make the sport karate community look good? Or are you posting something that's kind of silly and it's a meme and maybe inappropriate or maybe really inappropriate, right? And I'm not saying that you can't have fun on social media. That's what social media was made for in the first place, was having fun and communicating with friends. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of fun, but there is something wrong with being irresponsible on social media, right? And there is something wrong with being completely inactive on social media, because if you're completely inactive on social media, then in the modern world, nobody's going to know who you are, right? So it's important to be active on social media, be a positive role model for others. Those things are going to help you get noticed by coaches of some of these big teams, which is going to help you get that opportunity to get on one of those teams. And it also has the opportunity to grow sport karate as a whole, because the more people that are posting about what we do, the more people are going to see what they do. And for every 100 people that see it, there's bound to be that one kid that looks at it and goes, wow, that's cool. I want to be like that person. I want to learn how to do sport karate, right? That's really what this is all about. Let's move on to number 3 on the countdown. My third Christmas wish, or I guess my 7th or 8th at this point, whatever. You know how this goes, right? Next on the list, talk to people at tournaments. Don't be intimidated by anybody, right? I can't tell you how many times that I've been teaching a seminar, right? So I teach a seminar for 2 hours at some school somewhere, right? And at the end of the seminar, I always do a little Q&A, and then, I have sessions where people can come up, and if they want pictures, autographs, stuff like that, that's all cool, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've had, a teenager, a little bit of an older student, right, come up to me and say, wow, you're so much more approachable, right? Like you're really cool. Like, I enjoy talking to you. Like, it's great to like meet you and get to know like who you are and everything, right? And I'm like, it's a compliment. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But in the back of my head, I'm always a little bit like, well, wait a minute. Did y'all think that I was just like a jerk when I was competing, right? When really that's not what it is. But when you just see somebody on YouTube, like I'll use myself as an example here, and all you see me do on YouTube is get on stage and yell and get hype and look like a crazy person doing my form and have that fire in my eyes because all that I care about is being the absolute best, then yeah, you're probably not going to think that I'm very fun to talk to or share a coffee with, right? However, when you actually get to know some of these competitors, a lot of us are fun people, right? And I know that I'm not really in that role anymore, right? But don't be intimidated by some of the best competitors in our sport, right? Don't be afraid to go up and talk to them and introduce yourself, and you just might learn something from them. I can't tell you how many times that, I would be lined up waiting on scores and the judges were going down the line or whatever, and I'd be standing next, maybe I was 4th of the seeds, right? And so drew 4th of the seeds, that is. And so, the competitor next to me is a non-seeded competitor. Maybe it's their first NASCA tournament. And, we strike up a little conversation, small talk, and I'll typically give a few tidbits about like, oh yeah, look out for this. Oh, you see this judge, he pays close attention to your back foot on your front stances, so look out for that, right? Sharing those little tidbits of information, right? If you are one of those newer competitors and you feel intimidated or you're nervous to talk to somebody that you see on YouTube all the time, you see them on stage, you see them on ESPN at the US Open, if you talk to them, you just might learn one of the things that they know from all that experience, right? And in addition to that, most people aren't that afraid to talk to their own competitors because you're sharing the ring with them, so you kind of have to talk to them at some point, right? But a lot of competitors are still intimidated about talking to team coaches, right? Do not be afraid to talk to a team coach, because if you want to get on a team, then that coach needs to know your name. They need to know who you are. And most importantly, they need to know that you're interested, right? And again, I'll use myself as an example here so that I'm not having to throw anybody else's name out, right? But again, coaching position on Paul Mitchell, one of the head coaches of Competitive Edge, right? Those are teams that a lot of people want to be on, right? So there's nothing wrong with at a tournament and you see me around, come up to me or with Competitive Edge, go up to Reed, go up to Cole, go up to Jake, come up to any of us and say, hey, I'm interested in Competitive Edge. I want to know more about, what do you guys look for in a new team member? When do you guys do your recruiting, right? I have people DM me those questions on social media all the time. Ask me in person, shake my hand, let me know that you're interested, right? Same thing goes for anybody that maybe has that goal of one day getting on Paul Mitchell, right? I promise anybody on the Paul Mitchell coaching staff, we don't bite, right? Coach Damon, if you're a fighter and you want an opportunity to maybe fight for Paul Mitchell someday, go say hi to Coach Damon. Shake his hand. Say, sir, it's great to meet you. Love watching your fights on YouTube. If you don't watch Damon's fights on YouTube, you better, because he was an awesome fighter, right? Coach Rodriguez, love Coach Rodriguez. Go talk to him, right? Steve Babcock, Chris Rappold, all those executives, right? And I'm talking about Competitive Edge and Paul Mitchell because those are the teams that I'm intimately involved with, right? If you want to be on top 10 Team USA one day and you see Jarrett Liker, go talk to Jarrett, right? Go talk to these people because 99% of the time, as long as they're not actively in the middle of something, they're going to want to talk to you as well. They're going to appreciate your interest in their program, and it's going to help you develop some of those connections that you need. Because again, coaches are not going to recruit you if they don't know who you are and they don't know whether or not you even want to be on that team. The best way to make sure somebody knows who they are, hello, sir, ma'am, let me shake your hand. My name is so-and-so. I've been training for this many years. I'd love to represent your team one day. That's all it takes. Anyway, just a little bit of advice from Jackson. Moving on. Number 2, we're getting to the end here. The last 2 are easy because they're short, sweet, and simple. Number 2 is, and I typed this one in all caps in my notes, don't be afraid to be different. I'm going to say it again. Don't be afraid to be different, right? There are some competitors on the circuit right now who already do a fantastic job of this. There are some competitors who struggle with this, right? Just because every other competitor who wins does a trick pass that goes from the right side of the ring all the way across the middle to the left side of the ring does not mean that you have to. Just because every other competitor does a flash kick that starts from the front corner of the ring and goes to the back corner of the ring, that doesn't mean you have to, right? No matter what, if you see these trends, if you see something that all of the good competitors do, yes, you should draw inspiration from them, but that doesn't mean that you should do exactly what they do, right? And I want to give some advice on form building here. And this is typically only information that I give out in seminars or private lessons, and you guys are getting it for free here, right? When you sit down to make up a new form, like many of you are probably doing in the next few weeks to get ready for the AKA Warrior Cup, when you go to make up a form, you should have a couple of steps in this process. Number 1, establish what tricks you want to do, assuming that it's a creative, musical, or extreme form that you obviously would need to choreograph, right? Identify what tricks you want to do. What are your best tricks? What are your favorite tricks? How are you going to increase your difficulty? Pick out those first. Then fight against the norm. Say, okay, I have a really good X out. But when I see top competitors do X outs, they typically do it as their opening move. They say their intro and then they do an X out going away from the judges. So you know what? I want to do an X out because I have a really good X out. But instead of doing it going away from the judges, I'm going to put it in the middle of my form and I'm going to do it going straight at the judges because that's going to be different, right? That's what I mean when I say don't be afraid to be different. Now, moving on with my little tiny workshop about how to build forms. Establish what tricks you want to do. Then fight norms. Figure out where you're going to put those tricks by going against the grain. Don't do what everybody does. Find a new place to put that technique. And then, and this might be the most important thing, use your basics as the glue. The majority of any martial arts form, creative, musical, extreme, or otherwise, should be your traditional martial arts techniques. It makes sense. It's a martial arts tournament, right? So you should use the glue, which is the majority of your form, right? The tricks in your form, when it comes to tricking in an empty hand form, those tricks are only going to take up maybe 15 seconds of a full minute long routine, right? all of that other time should be spent maybe with a little bit of theatrics, but mostly, the vast majority, foundational martial arts techniques. And on that same note of creativity, not only should you mix in a majority of foundational techniques, but don't put them together the same way everybody else does. Chop, punch, ridge, chop, punch. Chop, spear, chop, punch. Forward strike, up, down, side, side. Chop, 7-cut, 7-cut, 7-cut punch with commas, right? Whatever the case may be, don't just do what everybody else does. Do you need to use some of those staple combos a time or two throughout the form to show off speed and to show that you can execute those skills cleanly? Sure, that's fine. I'm not saying completely avoid that. I had a competitor that I competed against years ago who made it a point in his extreme form to never, ever do a chop punch. And he was good. He won some grand championships, and that was great. And I appreciated the difficulty of creating an entire form without having a chop punch. But if you do an entire form without chop punches, at some point it's going to look a little weird, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing a chop punch here, a chop punch there. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of the standard techniques. But as often as you can, try to break away from that and do something different. You're not going to be able to make up a competitive CMX bow form without doing a forward strike, up, down, side, side at some point. It is a staple strike combo that you need to do somewhere. You probably need to do a couple of times. But mix it up in addition to that. Don't only do that. Don't be afraid to be different. And my last note, this one I also put in all caps. My last wish, my last Christmas wish for all of you is to love what you do. Oftentimes in sport karate, we get so caught up, especially in those busy moments of a season in the spring when you've got a bunch of tournaments back to back and you're traveling all over the place and you're trying to make adjustments and get your form ready for the next tournament and you're worried about the US Open night show selection and you're worried about this and you keep dropping this one move and you're trying to fix that. It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of a tournament, in the hustle and bustle of a season, and forget the reason you're doing it. Because the reason you're doing it should be because you love it. I've said on the podcast many times before, and I will say it again. We don't do sport karate to get rich or famous. Because you could go undefeated on the NASCA circuit today and not make as much money as Linda Dinley did back in I don't remember. I saw this post recently. It was probably early 90s, something like that. Or maybe it was late 80s, maybe like 87, whatever the case may be, 85. Yeah, maybe something like that. Anyway, I forget the date, right? But over 30 years ago, right, you could go undefeated in sport karate and make less money than you would have 30 years ago, right? Which is a problem in and of itself, right? So we don't do this to get rich. We don't do it to get famous, right? Because even if you get to become a sport karate superstar, right? Even if you're somebody on the US Open stage, right? The sport karate community, as much as we love it, it's admittedly small. And we're trying to grow it. But as of now, in the grand scheme of things, it is a small community. So we're not doing it to be famous. Because if you're sport karate famous, you're only a tiny little bit famous. You're not really actually famous, right? So we don't do it for the money. We don't do it for the fame. So what do we do it for? We do it because we love it, right? It's one of the things that I appreciate most about kind of the 2019 through 2021, those last several years that I was competing regularly. Obviously, there was COVID in the middle of it. But I really looked back because 2017, 2018, my second and third years as an adult competitor, it was heavily focused on legacy. It was heavily focused on win, collect as many Warrior Cups, collect as many US Opens, what have you, set these records, win these titles, right? But by the time I hit 2019, it was when you've won everything that you ever dreamed of. Because when I was a kid, I said, if I win the US Open once, I could retire and be happy. If I could just win the US Open one time, I could retire and be happy. If I could just win one Warrior Cup, I could retire and be happy, right? So once you've won these things that you dreamed of when you were 7 years old, right? You realize that the reason that you kept coming back wasn't just to get a Warrior Cup. It wasn't just to get a US Open. But it's because when I was up there, there was nothing I loved more than being up there. I'll be honest. US Open, for example, right? There's nothing better to me than the moment that you're on stage at US Open And the second best thing, and you guys are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, the second best thing is not winning the U.S. Open. The second best thing is warm-ups, right? And let me explain what I mean there. So the number one best thing, and this goes for a Warrior Cup as well, right? U.S. Open just is the first that came to mind. Actually, I'm going to use Warrior Cup as the example because it's coming up here in just a few short weeks for you guys, right? A Warrior Cup, right? You go on stage, that's the best part for me, right? I am at peace. I am having fun when I am on stage performing for people with everything on the line. You've got to hit every trick, and if you don't catch every trick perfect, you're not going to win, right? To me, that thrill, that adrenaline, there's nothing like that in the world. I still chase that feeling to this day. I will chase that feeling for the rest of my life, right? That is fun. There's nothing like that, right? But the second best thing to that is not winning in my memory. The second best thing was the hour, the 2 hours, when the show is going on, you're backstage, you're watching other people win their Warrior Cups, you're watching other people win the division that's going to qualify them for the Warrior Cup round, and you're pacing, and you're going through your tricks, and you've got your music playing, and you're watching your competitors warm up too, and you're getting pumped, and there's nothing you want more. You're like a bull in the stable, ready to be let out onto that stage, right? That's fun too. There's nothing like that. And for those of you that were around to watch me backstage at a NASCAR tournament, I was typically acting like an idiot. I was typically running back and forth, skipping around, circling my arms, doing bow tricks, dancing, right? Because I was back there having fun. Because I knew that the most fun thing in the sport was about to happen in an hour. I knew that's what I was getting ready for. That's what I was warmed up for. That's what I was breaking a sweat for. That's what I could not wait to get out there and do. And then, yeah, the third best thing is winning, right? But that warm up and then being up on stage, there's nothing like that. It's what we all live for, right? So don't let yourself in this 2023 season get caught up in everything that happens in a sport karate season or even at a single tournament. Live in the moment and remember to love what you do. And if you don't love it, quit showing up. You got to love it. Because when you love it, that's when you're going to be at your absolute best. That's also when you're going to be the most relaxed, which allows you to perform better on stage, right? So remember, when you're warming up and you're about to go on stage for a Warrior Cup final, because there's someone watching this show, I don't know who it is, but there's someone watching this show right now that is probably going to have a chance to win a Warrior Cup. And when you find yourself in that moment and you're pacing backstage and you're nervous because you have a chance to go up there and win one of the most coveted titles in all of sport karate, remember that that's the fun part. Don't get caught up in everything around you. Remember that this is what you live for. And I promise you, if you remember that, when you go on stage, you're going to have a whole lot of fun. I'm Jackson Rudolph. This has been season 3 of the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. Episode 119, Christmas wish list is complete. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph. I'll see you next time.